This is a CBS News special report. I'm Tony Dokoupil in New York, and we are coming on the air on this, the last day of the Supreme Court term, with a groundbreaking decision from the court that could have a big impact on the arguments around and over birthright citizenship. The justices have just ruled on whether a single federal judge has the authority to issue what are known as nationwide injunctions that block federal policies across the entire U.S. That case goes back to a Trump administration executive order issued back in January to limit who can claim U.S. citizenship from being born, following being born in this country. Jan Crawford is our Supreme Court watcher, and she's at the court for us this morning. She's been reading this ruling, which came out just minutes ago. I understand it's a thick opinion, Jan. What does it say?
Well, first of all, Tony, I think it's important to say right at the top, this is not an opinion about birthright citizenship, about the merits of that issue, about whether or not Trump's executive order is blatantly unconstitutional, as every federal judge says. So put that to the side. This is only a ruling, and it is, I agree with you, a major landmark ruling on whether federal judges have that power, one federal judge, to basically dictate policy nationwide by invalidating a president's initiative. This is not a partisan issue. This is something that's a recently new phenomenon we've seen in the last decade. Presidents, starting with President Obama, obviously the first administration, President Trump, President Biden, all have had to deal with federal judges blocking their initiatives and then implementing it in a nationwide manner. So this is a big win, not only for President Trump, but for presidents of any party, because what this means is, and what the court says in its 6-3 ruling written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, dividing conservatives and liberals along ideological lines, that this is not how our system is supposed to work. That Congress, when it established powers of the federal judiciary back in 1789, never intended for judges, one judge, to be able to basically set the rule for the whole country. We have an appellate system. They work through the system. That's how the system is supposed to work. So the justices in this ruling today are saying it's not appropriate in most cases. It's got to go about the normal process. But there are ways to get nationwide relief. And the court says today, for example, people can file class actions where that can perhaps apply nationwide. The point is, this is about process, and you got to drive the right car to the courthouse. And here, they didn't do it the right way. So the court's saying, do this the right way, the way the system is supposed to work. That means that I strongly believe, Tony, that there is very little chance that this executive order on birthright citizenship will ever be implemented. We're going to see people right away next week come back, refile some of these cases, ask for class actions that could be certified across the country. There's a process with that. You will still have some of these injunctions in place. This is just narrowing them a little bit so that they only apply to the parties who filed these cases, not to everyone. So I think it's highly unlikely that this will have any practical impact on that birthright citizenship order ever being implemented. Tony.
All right, Jan, thank you very much. Let's go to our justice correspondent, Scott McFarland, who's been following this as well. Scott, these injunctions have been a tool of those who oppose President Trump's efforts to block them, to stop them. And now it seems like the injunctions will be limited in some way. But Jan says maybe the implications aren't going to be as broad as that may sound. What do you think the implications will be in terms of the relationship between the Trump administration and the federal courts?
Yeah, Tony, it's an important ruling, but it also comes at a uniquely important moment amid a multi-front battle between the administration and the court system, a legal battle and a political battle, too. First of all, the politics. The administration likes to be criticizing the courts. They like to have that issue to push forward their issues of the day, accusing the courts of overreaching and muting the desires of the voters who elected President Trump. But the legal battles have been unprecedented, some of them potentially destabilizing to the balance of power. Just a couple days ago, the Trump administration, in a novel case, sued every federal judge in the District of Maryland, accusing them of overreaching with how they handle immigration cases. The Trump administration, Tony, is accused of not following a court order, also in Maryland, to return Hilmar Abrego Garcia, the man mistakenly deported from Maryland to El Salvador. And the battles are playing out all across the country, a legal showdown in so many places, Tony, between the Trump administration and the federal courts.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Let's bring in Jessica Levinson. She's a CBS News legal contributor. She's also a professor at Loyola Law School. Her work focuses on constitutional law, election law, and the Supreme Court. Jessica, what do you make of Justice Coney Barrett writing this majority opinion? And a lot of people thought it was going to be John Roberts.
Well, I think it makes some sense given where she is on the court. And I think she was able, obviously, to command more than a simple majority, but a 6-3 majority. In your questioning during oral arguments, I think you really heard her trying to make sense of this case and be very clear, as Jan said, that it was not about birthright citizenship. It's not about the merits. It's about the equitable power of Congress. Of Congress to grant judges this power. And so she's saying very clearly, if Congress wants to change this, they can. She's also saying very clearly that when people walk into federal court now and they ask for relief of an executive order, they cannot get these universal injunctions anymore. Instead, courts are limited in the scope, the remedy that they can provide. They can provide a remedy of saying to the people who walked in, maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a group, maybe it's a state, maybe it's a class action, as Jan was absolutely correct to emphasize, that the court can give relief to those people. I think increasingly, to your question, Tony, we're going to see Justice Barrett, who I think can speak to all sides of the court, have some of these big opinions. And it's important to listen to how she asked the questions in oral arguments. I think it gave us a roadmap for this opinion today.
All right, Jessica, thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Jan Crawford. Jan, you gave us a great overview of the majority opinion, but you've also been taking a look at the dissents in this case. You've only had a few minutes to digest it, but what stands out to you?
Well, I'm also getting information from Melissa Quinn, who is inside the Supreme Court, saying that Justice Sonia Sotomayor is reading aloud from her dissent. Remember, the 3 liberal justices dissented in this case, even though one of them, Justice Kagan, expressed extreme skepticism about nationwide injunctions when President Biden was in the White House. Now they're in dissent, and their dissent is really focusing on the issue of birthright citizenship and how this was the case that was really suited for a nationwide injunction. Remember, though, as I said, Tony, this has nothing to do with birthright citizenship. No judge that's considered that issue has ever said anything other than it's blatantly unconstitutional what President Trump's trying to do. And I do not believe the justices would ever greenlight that to go forward. So they're saying that this is the wrong case, that this case should have been one that could be a nationwide injunction. There are a few cases. And that was kind of the point that Justice Kagan was making during the oral argument, that maybe there would be some case that would be suited for a broad nationwide injunction blocking a president's initiative. The problem with that, though, Tony, as the other justices pointed out, is that every federal district court judge is going to think the issues before them are of extreme national importance. So it's not really going to have any impact at all. You have to do something with a little more teeth to it. For example, President Trump is now facing 40 or 50 nationwide injunctions in other cases, challenging other initiatives that he has put out there. So I do expect, going back to something Scott was saying, I do expect the administration to file motions to vacate the scope of those injunctions and try to narrow them in all of those cases. And they may win some of those. But I'm just saying, in the birthright citizenship case, I'm highly skeptical that this decision today will have any real practical impact on whether Trump gets to rewrite our understanding that citizenship is automatic when you're born in this country, if you're here legally or not.
You know, Jan, people turn to Supreme Court decisions for a definitive answer, and I can imagine some viewers looking at the headline we have in the lower part of the screen that says injunctions likely exceed. What's the work of that word likely doing in that sentence? Why don't we have a definitive does exceed or does not exceed?
You know, looking through the opinion, that's a great question, and that's the language that Justice Barrett uses. I think the opinion itself is pretty clear. I think what we have to remember is there are ways that people can get nationwide injunctions. You just have to do it in the right car. Get in the right car. You've got to file a class action. You have to file. You have a claim under a different federal law where you're seeking to vacate a agency rule. You have lived near a factory and you file a lawsuit that's specific to you, the party, but then that helps everyone if the court says no more to the pollution. So I think likely means like let's scale back on these things. There are ways to go about doing it. And Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, in their separate concurring opinion, make clear that you've got to go and do it the right way, that's important for the process. And so like this kind of case is no. But, we'll see. I mean, we've seen in some of these Trump cases, as you well know, Tony, that when lower court judges get cases back down to them, they don't always react the way I think the Supreme Court believed that they would react. But I think this one's about as clear as you can get in this case.
All right, and you're as clear as can be as well. Jen Crawford, thank you very much. Jessica Levinson, thank you. Scott McFarland, thank you as well. And just to recap for our viewers, the Supreme Court has ruled 6-3 that lower court judges cannot issue nationwide injunctions in local cases. Quoting from the opinion, which was written by Amy Coney Barrett, quote, when a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its own power too. But they did not rule on the merits of the constitutionality, the question of birthright citizenship. That is a case for another day. We'll be following that as well, of course. Our coverage of this Supreme Court ruling and others will continue on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7, on your local news, and of course tonight on the CBS Evening News. Many of you will now return to CBS Mornings. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony Dokoupil in New York.